It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. I'm your host. My name is Michael Evans. Glad to have made your acquaintance. Glad that you're listening today. You know, I want to address a couple of issues, and I think we're going to spend some time on this morning, because there are a couple of areas where I think we can dramatically improve our own positions here in a host of different areas, while simultaneously accomplishing our own personal as well as political goals. And that is essentially the topic of this morning's show. In fact, I'm going to expend an entire half of the show on it, a good 1 hour window. And the reason I am is because I think it's very, very important right now that we identify, define, and encourage leaders to step up to the plate right here, right now, today. You know, there are town halls being held all over the country now because Congress is out of session, and so senators and representatives have all gone home, and they're holding town halls to hear from their constituents, to hear their voices, to hear what they have to say. Now, in many cases, I get it, it's a sham, and they don't really care what you have to say. They're already well defined in their ideological positions. But by the same token, there are a lot of people in those audiences who are appearing there who still have open minds, still sit on the fence, still haven't made a choice, still haven't taken a stand. And so I want to encourage each and every one of us to make sure that we are taking the time to attend these events. You know, these events are critical to the overall education, not only of our representatives about the way in which we feel about things and how they should then act on our behalf, right? I mean, after all, they are representatives. They're supposed to represent our approach, our ideas, our feelings, our desires, our political goals and aims. I get it. They don't do a very good job. I'm not going to even dispute that. But what we also need to recognize is that the folks, right now the topic is immigration. That's really the number one issue that everybody is hammering on. And I've got to tell you that even if it's not, and that representative or senator comes in and they're just trying to hold an open dialogue, it's important that you realize that those people are, the people who are attending, in many cases, are coming in there with an agenda predefined. The progressive left is loading these town hall meetings with people who are on their side of the ideological fence on the issue of immigration. And so they're going in there and they're throwing these emotional arguments out. And, you know, I had a YouTube posting yesterday, and this guy lambasted me for suggesting that illegals should be exported if they don't sign up during the period of time after the borders are sealed. You know, that's been my contention all along, that the borders should be sealed, first and foremost. Nothing else happens, no bill or act is passed until that occurs, because that's a national security issue. And to be honest with you, it's far greater even than the illegal immigration issue. I mean, we're not talking just about immigrants who want to come over here and work and live and actually try to maybe integrate themselves into our society. We're talking about dangerous people who are crossing the border, and we don't know what their evil intent is. And once they get here, you know, they're in the mix, and it's almost impossible to pick them out. And it's not just the Mexican border, it's also these extended visas. So the upshot is that many, many people are going to these public town hall meetings with agendas predefined, and they're going there in droves. They're bringing their friends. They're, going carpooling and what have you, maybe even busing in some cases. So what I want you to do is I want you to recognize that those people who watch this show, your goal and your role is that of leadership. You are the leaders that are going to help us take and win back our nation. And in order to accomplish that, you've got a couple of things that you need to do. One, you need to be a leader of more than just an army of one. So that means that when these town halls are announced, it's your job to round up a group of folks and bring them with you. That's community organizing, but community organizing in a fashion which is actually productive. Secondarily, know that you're up against a fairly sophisticated opponent. These people are going there with a lot of emotional argument, and they're going there in vast numbers. And so you may well find yourself outweighed in terms of the total percentage of the audience that's there to attend. You should have your arguments well laid out, clearly and concisely, and written down. And the importance of that cannot be overemphasized, because I know, and I speak publicly all the time, and I know that from experience and from seeing other people struggle with it, public speaking is something that a lot of folks get very uncomfortable with. And when they do stand up, everything that they thought that they had in terms of their arguments pre-planned out and outlined in their head as to what they were going to say, the minute that they stand up and someone hands them that microphone, it all evaporates like smoke. And so I encourage you to, 1, write down your arguments. 2, memorize them and know them so that you have an opportunity to make sure that you get all of your points out. This is what you see when you see politicians being interviewed on television. Irrespective of the question asked of them, they always do the same thing. They always return back to their talking points. The interviewer will say to them, well, what about this issue? And they'll say, well, that issue isn't really important. What's important is, and then they go right back in and launch right into their bullet points. They're trying to express a message, and you should be too. You see, leadership comes with a level of responsibility associated with that. And good leadership comes with lots of practice. And leadership isn't just saying, hey, everybody, let's go. It comes with intelligent and articulate review. It comes with the idea that you are going to analyze and evaluate your situation, the circumstances, the topic, whatever it is, and then you're going to act appropriately. And so as leaders, you have to do more than just bring 8 friends with you. That's not a leader. That's an organizer. A leader is one who will go in there with 8 people behind them, who will back their play, and they will act as the spokesman, if you will. And you will have clear and concise, well laid out arguments that you can now put down and put forth in front of an entire group and come across as intelligent, articulate, well-reasoned. And you see, you're a prosecutor in this circumstance. If you want to look at it from this perspective, here's an analogy that you can use. Think of a courtroom, and the jury is sitting all around you. Your job is to bring that jury into your way of thinking. Your job is to give that jury the intelligence that it needs in order to make fully informed decisions. And make no mistake about it, the defense, in this case, of those who are defending, let's say, immigration, and use that, let's continue with this example, they're going to throw out all kinds of chaff, if you will, to try to preclude the argument, to distract the other jury members. You see, your job is to keep them on point and keep them focused. And I've got to tell you, the importance of this cannot be expanded upon enough. And I encourage you, if you are in a position of leadership, and if you're listening to this program, you should be viewing yourself in that fashion. If you're not, that's a mistake. Because I'm not out here talking on a day in and day out basis just to hear myself speak. There are folks who would argue with that. But the simple truth is, what is one of the mantras that we use here? Educate, inform, motivate, and activate. So we educate not only ourselves about the issues and about the topic that we want to educate and inform others about and ourselves, but then we take that education that we've gained and we've looked at both sides of the coin. We've looked at both the progressive argument, the ideology on that side of the fence. We look at the ideology and the arguments on your or our side of the fence. We then take that information and we use it to inform others. And again, we give out enough information so that people can make informed decisions. Anytime people don't have enough information to make an informed decision, when it comes time for them to defend their position that they've adopted as a result of your arguments, if they don't have a solid foundation and a basis by which to turn around and support their decision, they waver. And if they waver, you've lost them. And they've done more harm than good to our cause. So let's understand the importance of this. And I can't stress this enough. And I hope that, I know you guys like to hear news and you like to hear me get riled and all that kind of thing. But I got to tell you, this is an opportunity for us to shine and to make ourselves understood, heard, and well. I'll tell you what, if you go into a public meeting and you get up and you're emotional and you just argue the points, what you'll hear at the end of that is silence, and someone will stand up and rebut you. If you make a series of clear, well-defined, and well-reasoned and logical arguments, and you have the proof in your hand to prove it. In other words, have a quote from a representative or a senator or the president or somebody in Washington who is actually proving your point for you. And when you read that off, and you don't want to read, you want to look at them, then go back to your paper, then look at them, then go back to your paper, then look at them. Don't just read. Then it's a statement. Then it's not a presentation. And there's a big difference there. Anyone can read. Your job isn't to read. Your job is to engage. Your job is to educate. And you educate not just by sitting there reading. If a teacher did that in the front of the room and just sat there and read out of the textbook but never did eye contact with the audience, or never expounded and paused and then drew an analogy to help them understand what they've just learned, then they don't really learn it. They don't need the teacher to read it for them. They can read it themselves, or at least we hope. So here's the point. When you're in a public environment like that, make sure that you have your arguments well defined and clear, because you want to be able to take those arguments and make them in a well-ordered fashion, and I guarantee you the result will be that there will be people in that crowd that you will sway to your thinking. And not only will they sway to your thinking, but you will give them the ammunition, you will give them the support structure, the infrastructure that they need to defend and support that idea and opinion. In other words, when they get home, and they say to a family member or a friend or a coworker or someone at church, hey, you know what? This is what I believe about this issue. And I've made a decision, and here's my position on it. They then have the wherewithal to support that decision when whomever they're speaking to throws up the opposing viewpoint. But if they just walk in there empty-handed after nodding and saying, yep, that sounds good to me, but they don't really have a basis of understanding and knowledge of it, then for all intents and purposes, when the arguments come back at them, they will not have the tools necessary to respond properly. And what will happen is, one, they'll damage our cause, and two, as they lose credibility, they will waver from that position, and they will step back and go back up on the fence. Is that understood? In other words, when you hear me outline a topic of news, why do I take a half hour to beat a dead horse with a dead dog? I'll tell you why. Because I'm expecting you to learn it, but not just learn it by rote, by hearing me say it. I want you to understand the arguments that I have based that positioning on. It's critically important that you have that opportunity and that you exercise it. Because every contact that you make, every touch, whether it's in public, whether it's in private, matters. Every single one. We are outnumbered. We are outspent. We are outgunned. We are completely surrounded. Now, the advantage to that, of course, is that we can attack in any direction and be successful in engaging the enemy. And I mean this, I'm using this as a military analogy. We're not talking about physical engagement here. Okay? For the record and for the NSA who's probably capturing this, let's just be clear. There's my disclaimer. However, recognize what you're doing. You are a prosecutor. Your opponent, your enemy in the courtroom, is the opposite side. You are prosecuting the government for things that they are doing which are outside the scope of their authority. Therefore, you had better have your arguments well laid out, and you better understand how you arrived at those decisions, those opinions, those ideas. You've got to have a foundational understanding of why you think the way you think. That's why when you're having a conversation with someone and you feel like it's beginning to slip into the emotional realm and away from the realm of intelligent discourse, I always say to you, ask them why they believe that way. And that's where the rubber meets the road. Because what ends up happening is they, whomever you're having this discussion with, has a hard time articulating how and where they've come upon this opinion they hold. And more often than not, it turns out that it's a parroted opinion from someone else. And you'll hear it. They'll use a verbatim phrase or a statement they heard from someone else. That tells you it's not their opinion. It's someone else's opinion, and they're merely using it to try to bolster their argument. You, on the other hand, should have an entire arsenal, if you will, or a belt of tools, the Batman belt of tools at your disposal, so that you can take an answer that they come back to you with or a response, and you can have a group of clear foundational, well-designed and well-articulated, clear foundational arguments that you can turn around and debunk those theories that you know to be wrong. You know why they're wrong. Practice them. Practice them at home. Practice them on people at work. Practice them on your friends who already believe the way you do, and encourage them to pick holes in your argument. That's how you get better. Don't look at it as a personal affront. Don't take umbrage when they come back and baffle you. Figure out a way that you can now defend the position that you've outlined, and they've turned around and questioned you about it, and you felt disarmed. It's not that you're really disarmed. Maybe you just don't know how to respond to that. These are important skills for you to understand. They're part of the critical thinking process, but they're also part of the critical leadership process. And your job is to be a leader. We desperately, desperately need leaders. And I'm expecting you to be one of them. That's why you're here. That's why we do this program. My job is to educate and inform you. Your job is to then take that, do your own homework, do your own research, evaluate what I said, get enough and gather enough information to make an informed opinion, and then make it, and then understand thoroughly why you made it, how you made it, what your intentions are, where you gathered that information, what's your basis in fact, not emotion. You see, the opposite side will always do the same exact thing. When they run out of arguments, either parroted or otherwise, and some of theirs will be logical as well, and there may even be times when you will fall in agreement with them. I'm going to give you a perfect example of that, but let me. I don't want to get sidetracked here. When they do make a good point like that, recognize it for what it is and say, we're in agreement there. In fact, I'll give you a perfect example. When you are talking to folks right now about NSA surveillance and spying, guess who is most likely going to be on your side? The liberals, the Democrats in the room. You know why? Because they recognize it's wrong. And what that tells you is that all the collective conservatives in the room who disagree with you don't really have a good, solid, foundational understanding of why they are conservative in their viewpoint. If they truly did, they would understand that it is a blatant and open and obvious violation of everyone's constitutional right. And they would know the answer to the question, tell me one good thing that will come about as a result of these dossiers being built on every American. But answer me for yourself. Mr. Smith, Mrs. Jones, Mr. Roberts, I want you to turn around right now and give me one thing that this dossier development system will benefit you. Show me one way in which it will. And guess what you'll get? Crickets. Silence. Because they can't articulate and defend that position. There is no benefit. And you will encourage folks who are moderate Democrats, the old Democratic platform, to come to your aid and your cause. You may even get some of them to understand from the perspective from which you come. The value, listen, our job is to teach, preach, and proselytize. Our job is to educate and inform. Our job is to lead. Our job is to show the way, focus others so that their process of thinking and the way they think, and it's as individual as flowers, right? I mean, there's as many ways that people think as there are variants of a rose. So your job is to identify how that particular person thinks if you're in a one-on-one or a small group, or supposing that you're in a large room and you're in one of these roundtable discussions, then make sure that you're making points that those people, or at least those people who are still open, will agree with. Make your clear, logical argument, and they will see the benefit of what you talk about. So I want you to think about things before you react, because that is really, truly the definition of a leader. It's not just getting people to rah-rah up and show up. It's also showing them how to, your job is to teach the teacher. Everyone that subscribes to your viewpoint will then translate that viewpoint to someone else. Make sure that you're giving them the tools to translate correctly. Fair enough? When we come back, I want to talk about the second issue of leadership and how that pertains to you. This is an important topic, so please make sure you stick with us. If you're catching us on video streaming, when I break when I pause for the break, you just have to hit the play button again or hit refresh and play again. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. Please find us at americasvoicenow.org, facebook.com/America's Voice, and this and every other show at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We'll be right back.